Bam. We're streaming. Everything's good. I'm curious if anyone will watch this because I'm curious who has actually read this book.
Nerds.
I'm glad I read it again because now I remember it fully. I can see why I saw it the way I did. All right, let's do this. Stream's going. Everything looks good. Pages of Pain. Oops. Oh, it's playing out of the Marantz.
Lol.
Why is the Marantz running like a monitor? Come on, Marantz. I know you're old, but don't be weird. Okay. No one's watching yet, so we're good. Let's try that again. It's Thursday, June 20th, 2019. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is the GeekNights Book Club. Tonight, we are assuming that you read Pages of Pain by Troy Denning, the Dungeons & Dragons Planescape branded canonical novel. So I feel like it's a very basic thing to just talk about the weather. Like, we kind of like, home today, but we don't really talk about the weather. Like, not usually. It rained today, and normally I wouldn't say anything about it.
It's been raining all fucking week. I can't bike to work because it just keeps raining constantly.
Yep, and I was hoping maybe, because I'm going to pick my bike up tomorrow from the shop, so I was hoping I could get on a city bike tonight to go to that screening, the animation thing, and then I'd have the city bike for 24 hours, so I would use it tomorrow to go to work, and then to go to Chelsea to pick up my bike, and then ride my real bike home. But I don't think that's going to happen, because it ain't just raining, it is fucking raining.
Well, it stopped, but yeah, it was, I was sitting in a meeting at work, and then it starts, like, super raining, like, shh, boom, 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 shh.
Like, I've very rarely in my life seen rain this persistent and hard in the United States.
The time it rained the most is in between freshman and sophomore year of college when I was working at a summer camp, and at one time I was driving to or from the camp alone on the highway in Massachusetts, like in the Berkshires somewhere.
Yep.
And it rained so hard that with the wipers on the maximum setting, and they were good wipers, and there was nothing, whatever, I couldn't see shit. It was just a blur like I had Rim's eyeballs. I couldn't see nothing. I just pulled over to the side of the road and put the lights on and waited till I could see again.
So I've experienced like you a few times in my life in the U.S., but I've spent a lot of time in like Singapore and Hong Kong and parts of Asia. This is Singapore rain. Like, this is what it rains like during the rainy season in Singapore.
It's a lot of fun if you don't get caught in it and you're inside. And
or if you get caught in it.
And you don't want to bike to work.
I mean, I was out in it when it started raining really hard again.
I luckily came from work to here in between two rain blasts.
I stopped at the grocery store, so I'm walking back from the grocery store.
Mistakes are made.
I don't have my umbrella out, and it's just like on my back. And I feel like 1 or 2 drops of rain in my head, and I think, well, might as well open up this umbrella. Just let me open up the umbrella. And then just as I get it open, it was like a wall of water simultaneously hit the ground. Mm-hmm. It was amazing. Mm. I watched 2 cars hit each other, like right outside the apartment in the rain on the way in.
Don't drive.
Yeah, and a taxi driver tried to turn illegally onto the bridge. While I was crossing, so I just stood there.
Only bus can turn that turn.
So I was crossing, so I just stood there. And he couldn't get past me, and he rolled down his window to try to yell at me, and then the rain started going into his window, and he like rolled it up, and then he rolled it down a little bit to try to yell at me, and then I was bored, so I left. That was the end of that.
Okay.
But anyway, there's no news, because we're not going to talk about the coming, hopefully not actual war with Iran that we shouldn't be doing. It's too depressing. We're going to talk about something similarly depressing, the painful pages, but first it's time for Things of the Day. So, you watch a speed run of, like, especially Zelda games.
Well, there's a SGDQ is this Sunday.
Yeah, I'm hyped for this.
Hype.
But this channel, Terminal Montage, one of the things that they seem to do is they make little cute animations. Like that Carbot level of animation, like those old StarCraft animations? It's like that kind of, like, simple animation
I don't know
style.
what you're talking about, but okay.
Remember the little, like, the cute Zergs?
No.
And, like, the little lumpy... wow, really?
I mean, I might if you showed it to me.
Yeah, I'll show it to you later. So it's similar, like cute little Link doing his thing, but basically they animate in a jokey way what a Breath of the Wild speedrun, like a real one, actually looks like. So it has all the things that happen in a real speedrun, but animated in a pretty funny way.
Okay.
It's a better way to watch a Zelda speedrun than actually watching the speedrun.
Okay.
So what do you got?
I have for you a man named Jimmy Smith. Jimmy Smith is an amateur boxer. His record as an amateur boxer is 3-0. He's
Not bad.
He's up against another gentleman I don't know the name of.
So he beat Glass Joe. He beat the Kaiser.
Right, whatever. He's up against another gentleman in this heavyweight bout. The ring has an advertisement on it for Schlitz malt liquor, which is, I don't know, Rim says probably one of the worst 40s you can drink.
Schlitz is one of those beers that, well, quote-unquote
Beer?
beers.
It's a 40.
It's one of those beverages that came out of the fact that America had to rebuild its beverage industry from scratch after Prohibition.
Anyway, the title of the video is Jimmy Smith, the worst boxer ever. So Jimmy Smith goes up against this other boxer who is not the champion or anything, but clearly has had professional bouts and lived to box again. And here they are in a heavyweight bout. Keep in mind, Jimmy Smith weighs like 16-something pounds less than the other guy and is like a few inches shorter and has less reach.
But he's undefeated.
Yeah, well, in his amateur bouts. But none of that matters. Because once you see Jimmy Smith fight, you will know everything you need to know. It's one of those things that really fascinates me. I wish there was like a word. There probably is a German word for it. Where
There
it's
has to be.
Where it's like, you don't know shit about something, right? It's like, I don't know I could not be a graphic designer, for example. No way, I can't even draw. But if I look at graphic design, right, I can still tell for the most part, right? Obviously, I wouldn't get details right.
Yeah.
Especially, right? But
Or there's no accounting for taste.
right. But for the most part, I can tell that's good, that's Comic Sans, right? I don't need to know anything to know that's good, that's bad, right? It's like, in the same way, if you know nothing about boxing, you've never watched a boxing match in your life, maybe you're one of those people who despises boxing, mostly rightfully so, but it's okay to watch old boxing. I just think we should stop having any more boxing now that we know better.
See, also hockey fights. Like, I get really excited
agree.
watching a 90s hockey fight, but I don't ever want to actually see a fight like that in a modern hockey game.
Right, regardless, we have this old...
Well, the problem is I kind of do, but I also don't. So when it
Anyway,
happens, I get excited
when you
anyway.
watch this fight, even if you know nothing about boxing, you know... Even if it wasn't the title of the video, you can tell that Jimmy Smith is the worst boxer ever.
If you were not human,
Technically a professional because he's in this professional fight, being paid to fight.
if you were not a human and you stumbled upon this video with no
How
context,
did Jimmy Smith win his 3 amateur bouts?
I would love to see what those look like. Is the other guy doing the same elbow thing that he's doing?
I don't know. The point is, watch
Like,
this, and it is amazing.
You watch it, it's just like, buddy, that's not where your elbows go when you box.
It is very funny to watch this video.
You're about to get punched in the elbow.
And therefore, it is thing of the day level.
It's only 1 minute and 36 seconds long.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the context of this, as we've talked about a bunch, is that when I was a kid, I played Dungeons and Dragons.
And in Dungeons and Dragons, I don't know if it was ever a first edition thing. I'm pretty sure it was a second edition thing, mostly, right? There was a play setting for D&D that was official called Planescape, and the idea of the setting was one in which the players would have lots of access to portals that go between different planes to have a wild and crazy experience in all sorts of different universes really easily. And there was one central base of operations, which was a city that we argue over the pronunciation of.
The canonical pronunciation, which is stupid, is Sigil.
But it is written exactly the way you would write the word sigil, as in the word sigil.
You know, it's funny because when I was playing Dungeons and Dragons, like
S-I-G-I-L.
like in the 90s, no one actually knew how any of these things were pronounced because you just pronounced it however everyone around you pronounced it. So when
it's not like D&D was a topic on the radio or the TV. You would only read about it in Dragon Magazine or books. Right?
Or you'd meet someone, like you'd only say the words from Dungeons and Dragons out loud if you were playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Right. But it kind of makes sense for the word sigil to be the name of the city, right? It's like I inscribe my sigil upon the wall or something. It's like you have a sigil.
I don't think that really makes sense.
No. Yeah, a sigil is like it's like a symbol, right? An arcane symbol.
Yeah, but what would that have to do with the city? A city in like some plains somewhere.
It's a roughly fantasy-ish word. You wouldn't use the word sigil in everyday life.
Nah,
You would only use it in a D&D fantasy book context.
But it's a fantasy-ish word. It's
Although
not...
you mean in real life you might use the word rune, maybe, but even that's a fantasy word.
But case in point, I pronounced it dro, and I pronounced it sigil.
I said drow.
Yeah, it was random whether or not you knew the right pronunciation, unless you like meant.
Just because dro sounds stupid.
I think dro sounds better than drow.
Drow is better.
Drow.
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 But the way it's spelled, phonics kid.
Drow.
D-R-O-W, dro.
Drow.
Dro.
Drow.
Anyway, sigil.
Sigil.
So the difference in experience between me and Scott is that I had read all the Planescape source material before this novel
I have
came
never
out.
read any Planescape material, even to this day, except this book.
So Scott, before we get into it, what I'm curious about is what do you think, or what did you think like that sword lady was before you read this book?
Oh, before I only knew things about D&D, right? About these settings that I learned from osmosis, hanging around nerds who talked about these things, or taught me about these things, or told me about their character.
Like, this is how I know about Dark Sun, because I never played Dark Sun games until way later. So in middle school, I would hear about Dark Sun from the cool kids.
Didn't you play like one Dark Sun session?
I played a couple of Dark Sun sessions in high school.
I never even heard of it till we got to RIT, and I think we played it once.
We played it because you were the Thri-Kreen.
We played like one session, and I think all I heard was other people talk about it and say, yeah, this is what Dark Sun's all about. I didn't ever read a Dark Sun book.
Pretty sure Dark Sun is not canonically connected to Planescape. Like, you can't get that from here.
Regardless, I did play Planescape Torment, but it was such people love that game, I know. But it was such an annoying game for me to play. Just like, like
the gold box games. Like.
Yeah. So I ended up, actually, when I was younger, there was some other PC games I played on DOS, and they would, while the games were loading or installing, they would show you like a video trailer for Planescape Torment. Because it was like made by the same publisher company or whatever. Anyway, I actually played the game later in life. And I didn't really absorb too much of the lore because I was just sort of reading a fact to get through it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I never would have gotten, like, Baldur's Gate, I got through, like, to the town, and that was it. I can't really get very far in those games. So the only reason I even beat it was from cheating, and I didn't learn too much from cheating. I didn't read a lot of the lores and stuff.
Yeah. So the deal with...
So I only know what I absorbed from other people talking. Like, yeah, there's a city. It's got a bunch of portals to other planes. It's the center of the multiverse. There's some lady there who's made of swords. You've seen pictures of her everywhere because you've been in a game store before.
Yep.
She comes if she's mad at you in the city and kills you. She's the Lady of Pain. She runs the show there. She's all mysterious and shit. She's the terrible secret of space.
So here's
something
the context.
about gods not coming there, and if you pray to her, she gets mad because then she would become a god, and that would be bad because
so the context,
it's bad to be a god there.
The context you wouldn't have that came up a lot in the book is a few specific Planescape things. Number one is that in Planescape, it's different from the prime material planes. Like, people there are just different. Like, if you're on a prime material plane, like Forgotten Realms, and you just die, your soul just goes straight to the plane of whatever god you worship. In Planescape, fuck you. Now what? Like, gods aren't going to help you. You're out. It's like being in a city versus being in, like, the provinces. Number two, the other weird thing is that there are these factions. It's like a big part of the original Planescape setting.
I got a vague hint of that in Planescape Torment.
Well, because every character except the Thracian, or Thracian, or however, the Amnesian hero, Theseus, maybe, every one of them is basically in one of these factions, like Tessali the elf, the Barrier, like the goat centaur, who believes that he's the center of the universe. Every one of them is like in one of these factions. And in the game world, the factions are like something characters join, and it's part of the plot. And they're all very simplistic philosophy nonsense things. Like, one of them is a faction of hedonists, and the leader is, of course... yeah, exactly. The leader...
That's for me. Give me the grapes.
The leader of that faction is a
my
woman.
Lounging chair.
It's a woman who is a werecat because Catgirl.
Oh, baby.
Yeah.
Sign me up. I already chose. I don't need to hear the other options.
You are objectively correct, because the ones you encountered in this fucking book that you
They're all
read,
garbage compared to the one you just described.
Yeah, let's see. This one, awesome Catgirl, pleasure forever, awesome. The Dustman. Everything sucks and we're all gonna die.
Yeah, that one sucks. Yeah. No.
I am literally the center of the universe.
Nope,
and
next, please.
Yep, they're all dumb like that.
Yeah.
Those guards in the beginning, those are another faction.
Nope. Not
Yeah.
better than Cat Lady.
None of them are good news.
Only Cat Lady's the only good one?
Yeah, there's literally the only good one.
All right, so that brings up the first point about this book that I want to make is that you don't need to know any D&D stuff to read this book.
Nope.
But it really sure helps because
Yep.
they basically just assume you know a lot of things, right? Proper noun-wise, which, other fantasy novels with their proper nouns, right? Like,
Yeah.
say, Prince of Nothing.
We love the Prince of Nothing. 2 words in, it's all
Right. But, they lead you in, and through context and through reading, you sort of begin to understand what the proper nouns mean and what's going on without it having just being told to you, right? However, there is a lot of things that just go straight over your head because the book isn't that long and doesn't have that much context. So you learn enough to understand what's happening in the book, but there is a greater context, I feel, that's not necessary to understand the main story and its main characters, but that will be missed if you are not steeped in the Planescape lore, and I probably missed more than half of it.
Yep. And the other part of that, the context that's important, is that Pages of Pain was kind of, as far as I can tell, was kind of written to try to introduce people to the setting, because the setting had only been out a couple of years.
Oh, okay. Another thing is that even stuff that you could understand what was going on, for example, right at the beginning of the book, he goes to wait in this line to go talk to someone at a window, and you get the idea that like there's this bureaucracy in the city, right, and has a thing going on, and like I understood the deal basically,
Yeah.
right? But I felt like if I was a Planescape nerd, I would be reading this right now.
Like, oh, that's
like,
so-and-so's
like,
bullshit.
Right, like, oh, baby. But because I hadn't read any Planescape stuff, it was, all right, I get it. There's some bureaucracy thing. You wait in a line and talk to someone, and you can get stuff from, because there's no government that's like a real government, or it's definitely not a democracy, right? So...
Yeah, it's a bureaucracy. It's generally, the way people play and run Planescape, at least in my experience, is they tend to set it in Sigil as opposed to doing a lot of planes hopping.
Well, I mean, when you set it in Sigil, you can planes hop easily.
Yep.
As we see in the book.
And Sigil is sort of like a mishmash of...
It's like if you started it and say, I don't know, the plane of fire, and you were immune to fire, I guess.
Yeah.
Usually the plane of fire is just like you make a portal to throw someone into fire, right? Right. But, if you set a game in some other plane, the idea would be it's like, all right, well, you had to leave the plane somehow, which might not be so easy. But when you're in Sigil, you can hop around a lot of planes.
Well, that's what I'm getting to.
It's like start your New York game in Grand Central. Don't start your New York game in distant Brooklyn.
Sigil is basically the New
Island.
York City of the multiverse because it's the center of the multiverse's economy.
Right. If you start your New York game out in Long Island and there's one LIR station and it's on a weekend, it's like the player characters getting to Manhattan is going to be rough. You start it in Grand Central, it's like, yeah, you could get out to Long Island pretty easily.
Your analogy is better than you realize. Remember all those bits about the people falling in the river through the portal and the wine and all that in the beginning?
Kinda.
There's an idea of portal keys.
Yeah. Well, they got into that a little bit when they were in the tavern.
That's a big deal in the Planescape setting. Like portals, you gotta have the key or the portal doesn't do shit.
That was actually one of the scenes that made the most sense, was the scene. They're in a tavern, and basically the police equivalent is coming after them, I guess.
Well, because the tavern serves illegal human meat.
Yes, and they need to hide, so they go through a door in the back of the tavern, and they do a special key thing, so that actually when they go back there, they actually go through a portal to some other room somewhere,
like a warehouse where they actually store this expensive wine and stuff.
Right. It's like a portal to a warehouse in another plane. And when the police come, they go through the door in the back to the back room, and they're just in a back room because they didn't do the special thing to activate the portal to the other plane. So that was pretty clever and fun. But then things develop from there.
Yep. So what I remembered reading this book...
That was a very D&D thing. Like, I escaped the guys by doing a clever,
But that's it. I remembered reading this book, and it was standard D&D book for the first fifth, and then it went way off the rails and got surreal, and that's why I remembered it, why I liked it, why I felt this weird need to read it again. And that first bit was very typical D&D nonsense. Every Forgotten Realms book has that kind of clever shit.
Well, it also had some kind of the character's name is Jake the Snake. It's like, oh my God, that's totally what
Jake
the dumb
the
guy
Snake.
in your party names their character.
But that's kind of on brand for the faction she's in.
Okay.
They're all...
Well, I guess then that is I guess you couldn't blame the author of this book, but instead the author of the setting for putting
Yeah.
D&D shit in.
Yeah, like imagine that faction is literally just Reaper from Overwatch. They're
So-
all just like edgelord pieces of shit.
So your edgelord friend who you let in the game and didn't kick out for whatever reason is always going to pick that faction.
Always gonna pick that faction.
Why aren't they picking the cat lady faction? That's how you know. Basically, here's what you do: you play a Planescape game. You list all the factions. You list the cat lady one last. Anyone who doesn't pick the cat lady one on their own, just kick them out of the game. You
Yup.
know they're no good.
Because you know if they ever get into a real multiverse situation, they're gonna make poor decisions.
That's right.
So, but yeah, like normal D&D stuff like that just happens with really stereotypical plot and everything, and then it goes way off the rails.
The characters act like PCs act in a D&D game of teenage nerds sitting around a table.
Yep, I look around the corner, make our formation. We're doing a trick. Like, let's do a thing.
Right.
But before we get into the crazy stuff, that beginning bit, one thing I noticed is that when I played Planescape and when most people would run Planescape, they tend to run Sigil as like a Perdido Street station, kind of like really dirty, dismal, like people are knifed in the back alley
That's
streets.
what it looks like in Planescape Torment.
Yeah, and that's how people tend to play it. But this book takes it to like, and this book does not at any point give you a view into any part of Sigil that's even remotely livable or nice.
Nope.
It's just awful, awful, awful. And
Every single person you talk to on the street is like,
I'll fucking
shall
kill
I
you."
violence you?
yeah.
Oh, you are talking to me. I assume you would like some violence or some thieving at least.
He bumps into that one guy who just like pulls out a knife instantly. Like,
Yeah.
But is it, I don't want to give Troy Denning that much credit here, but is it that they describe Sigil in this like horrific way because this book kind of has a lot of horrific themes, or that's how they viewed Sigil as opposed to like someone who read the setting book and might take a more nuanced approach to it? Or is that what Sigil looks like to the narrator, the Lady of Pain herself, who cannot perceive anything but pain? Because she only experiences the painful parts of Sigil. And that allegorical storytelling is there, and I feel like it was on purpose, coupled with the fact that the other way to look at it is the Thrasin. He comes from a nice place upstate, so he gets into this dirty city and is afraid of it, and everything's not nearly as bad as he is acting like it is because he just doesn't understand. Like, ew, it smells like pee, and people have knives, and they're trying to...
Well, he's also really... It's sort of a thing where, on the one hand, the story is about the Thrasin. Who is he? What's his deal? How'd he get here? All this mystery, right?
Which, as a nerd, as a kid, I didn't give a shit. I just wanted to know, is this going to tell me what the Lady of Pain is?
Right. That's the
And it
real
kinda
secret
did.
of space.
Like, it kind of does.
Sort of. But on the same time, by having this main character be, it's sort of a trope, right? Where the main character has amnesia. They're learning everything just like you are, reader, right? You know, about Sigil and the world. They've never been here. They don't know what's up. So you're learning along with them. So by combining that trope with also the story being about the character recovering the memory, it sort of overcomes the cliche in a way.
Yeah, and
Right.
to a degree it works. And I like how, because basically there is a plane that is just ancient Greece with Greek gods.
Of course.
So it just makes sense. And he is clearly just like a Theseus-like figure. Like he's just a Greek hero. And Zeus and Poseidon were like literally
Mostly
there.
Poseidon.
Yeah. Poseidon literally gave him a mission. And if you don't know anything about Greek mythology...
Or at least he remembers that. That's
Yeah.
the only thing he remembers.
that we'll get into that. That's a very important point about this book. What is a memory? But which is it treats memories the way a lot of good sci-fi books treat memories.
The way free market the RPG treats memories.
Almost literally. But imagine, like we'd already talked about reading this book if you don't know anything about Planescape. Imagine some basic person who likes D&D and reads this book but doesn't know anything about Greek mythology. Like, it kind of is important to understand Poseidon's deal.
You at least need to know you at least need to know basic characters and
Poseidon
Yeah.
is kind of a dick.
He's a watery
Poseidon, please
jerk.
don't drown me.
Right. You need to know at least that much, maybe a little more.
Don't worship Poseidon, but you gotta respect Poseidon.
Right.
Also, Egyptian gods, because I guess
Sure.
that's how Planescape works.
Greek and Egypt, pretty tight.
Yeah, Poseidon and I guess Set just make a deal to sell off a woman into slavery
Hubba hubba.
and or marriage. Maybe the same thing. So yeah, that all starts as like standard D&D plot. And then the Dabus, which you know about if you
Right.
read the source books.
All right, so this is the part where I think the book's biggest flaw is, but also maybe intentional, but still, in my opinion, bad, is that as you read the book, even in the beginning parts, but especially once the Dabus show up, right? That's where it goes off the rails.
Yep.
In many ways. But any individual scene, you can understand what's happening, right?
Like he is waiting in line and arguing and breaks
Right.
that guy's arm.
The transitions from literally every scene to every other scene are basically instantaneous, like a complete jump cut in some movie from one place to another place across the universe.
At one point, even gets lampshaded. Like he runs away with Jake the Snake, and then it has a little paragraph that's like, after a whole bunch of bullshit, they ended up in this alley.
Right. It's like that sentence almost doesn't even exist, right? It's like one sentence, they leave the tavern I was just talking about, right? They were doing that deal with the portal in the back and
Yep.
hiding, right? And then suddenly they're like outside. I don't know how the hell they got outside, but I guess the deal was over. They were outside. There were some Dabus building a wall for a maze nearby on the street. Some other stuff happens. And then they're just in the maze. It's like, what the fuck? It's like, how the fuck did that,
Now,
and
that's another, if you knew how Dabus work, they're basically like the minions of the Lady of Pain.
I understood that much.
They don't talk out loud.
I understood
They
that
literally
also.
make like rebuses and symbols appear around them. And you can interpret what they're trying to tell you by looking at all these symbols floating around their heads. And all they do is if you fuck with them, they kill you. And otherwise, they just build walls around you. And if they build a wall around you, you're in the mazes.
Right, but it's like the text was written in such a way that it's not like the rocks were encircling them and they tried to climb over and the Dabu pushed them and then
Yep.
they were it was just like, oh, there's some Dabus. We're in a maze. What? It's like there was no smooth transition showing how things got from this scene to the next scene.
So on one hand,
Anywhere, any scene change in the whole book was just instant.
until they're in the mazes.
And basically, so you spent the first portion of any scene trying to figure out what the fuck just happened, where are they now, what is going on, because like you could tell like what we're not in this past scene anymore, we're somewhere else now, what is happening. And so I was constantly reorienting myself, which in a way is thematic, like if I was getting pushed through a bunch of portals to different planes constantly, but they're not. This is almost entirely in Sigil,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. But in terms of that bit, like I feel like some of those missing scenes might have been
It's not missing scenes. It's just
Well, there are a bunch of missing
There's no
scenes.
transitions.
There's a bunch of missing scenes that are sort of like skipped over where I wonder if he had written a longer book and they were like, dude.
I also wonder how much of this corny stuff is the author's fault or the fault of sticking to the source material of the settings, like you just talked about Jake the Snake.
Well, like
right?
at one point, and it matters a lot for such a weird Dungeons and Dragons-y scene. He's in a random-ass alley, and he tries to jump over that puddle of mud, and then it tries to pull him in and turn him into goo.
Yep, that's very D&D.
Yeah, that is, so there's the 4 elemental planes, fire, water, earth, air. There's also 2 other planes, the positive energy plane and the negative energy plane.
Well, Slime Princess and Hot Dog Princess.
Yeah, it's that exact kind of like specific cosmology.
Yeah.
But like if you cast a healing spell in regular D&D, you're channeling energy from the positive plane, and necromancers channel from the negative plane. So where those 4 elemental planes intersect with each other, they make these like para-elemental planes. Like water and earth together form the para-elemental plane of ooze. It's the border between the two. Water and
They're all next to each other?
they're all next to each other in this multidimensional thing. I know more about this than I should. So like air next to the positive elemental or the positive energy plane, I think it makes like the plane of lightning.
Ooh.
If I recall correctly.
Sounds good.
And next to the negative plane, the negative energy plane makes the plane of vacuum. Which is not the same vacuum that spelljammers fly through. Spelljammers don't really fit into this cosmology directly. You
Anyway.
can make it work. So that is such D&D like bullshit.
Yep.
And it would have just been a throwaway scene, except it matters like deeply for the rest of the book.
Yep.
And it was weird that was one of the transformative moments for this character. Like, it just stood out to me as being a strange way to make the allegorical transformation of the character become a literal transformation of the character. And you can see how that, and then when they cut the foot off and they replace it with the hand, and then Tasali's hands get cut off, it's sort of making this meta point around how, like, when you're injured physically, you have a wound that you and everyone else can see. But when you're injured spiritually or mentally, you carry that pain and it's invisible to anyone but you.
Except for the Lady of Pain and the Thrasin eventually can see it.
Yep, the lady can see those husks.
It's a bunch of colored husk pustules on your body, and they can get popped, I guess, somehow. And
so
it really hurts.
There is consistency in the color of those pustules.
I figured that out, yeah.
I did not care enough to try to remember.
I didn't figure out. No, I didn't figure out which ones were which, but I did figure out. That person has those colors. This person has those colors. They're kinds of pain. They're flavors of pain.
Yep.
Right. It's like your pain comes from, I don't know, self-loathing, and yours comes from
fear of death,
fear of something, right? Or
existential crisis, doubt, anguish, loss, etc.
Whatever.
I did like how even Karfud, who is like the most badass, I am a demon, I give no fucks.
Well, that's another example of I just want to bring that up as a sudden scene change.
Yeah.
It wasn't just the fact that it was a sudden scene change. It was just like, there's a demon guy here now. There was no foreshadowing of this demon guy. It's just the Thrasin went somewhere, and there was a demon, and he met him and said hi, and now the demon's a major character who's there for the rest of the book. And it's just like, no intro, no nothing to tell you that this is, right? It's just he sees someone, meets, and it's such a D&D thing. Walk into a tavern, there's an NPC. I'm looking for an NPC. There's one. Talk to them. Now they're in the party. Now they're part of your plot, right? But it doesn't really make for great novel.
Yep, but it works in a sense because he's like the only person who is in the mazes on purpose.
That's true.
Like, he locked himself in there, and there's sort of this meta plot that ties so much into just like Planescape nonsense that there's this idea in Planescape that gods are basically collections of people who had similar ideas that formed into like a bigger being that has that same idea en masse. And Sigil is at the center of the multiverse on top of an infinitely tall spire, and no gods can get there. And there's one god who's been climbing up that tower for billions of years trying to get to the top, and he can't because it's infinitely tall. And if it truly is the godless center of the multiverse...
You mean Sisyphus?
It could be. But if it truly is the godless center of the multiverse, and all meaning springs from belief, then you get the impression that this demon guy went there to try and figure out the meaning of the universe and or take over the universe.
Right, he's making maps of everything.
He's trying to map the center of the universe.
He's very protective of his maps.
Yep. Like,
he's put a lot of work into them.
Almost comically so when he just skins the barrier later. And
yeah. Well, he says he didn't, but he totally did.
Yep.
And then,
I mean, he's a chaotic evil demon, like a demon lord.
Yeah.
What do you want?
It's like, you can't forget he's an evil demon.
Yet somehow he is like literally the only character in this party making rational decisions at any point.
No, he's competent and powerful and has goals.
And while he lies,
hasn't lost his memory.
While he lies, that's what demons do. He doesn't renege on his deals.
No, he made a blood pact. I think he physically can't renege.
Yeah.
Right?
That's all deal.
He's not. I mean, maybe if he just said the deal, he could renege easily.
But it's another one of those things where, like, if you know D&D shit, you know what a Tanari is, and then he's like, ah, I smell a Marilith. Like, yeah, that's the snake ladies. He wanted to, quote unquote, enter the frenzy. It's Demon Ponfar.
Empty the granaries.
That was very D&D, that bit. But yeah, he's there. I'm trying to think where I was going with all that. Just these characters. He's the only competent, interesting character. The main character is competent but makes stupid decisions because of the wine woman. Jake makes terrible decisions.
Yep.
That's why Jake was going to be locked up. She was probably locked up for good cause.
Yeah.
Tasali actually is pretty reasonable, like the elf guy.
Is a reasonable, intelligent, person, is just sort of on the wrong side of things a little bit.
Well, he runs the asylum, and from his perspective, Jake is crazy.
I mean, at first you sort of feel at the beginning of the book you feel like he's just wrong and is like an evil guy who locks people up for no reason.
Yep.
But then as the book goes on, it's like, oh, that guy's rational. Yeah, Jake is crazy.
Jake has clearly been going around just murdering people.
Yeah, it's like you totally should lock her. We should listen to that guy.
I feel like he might have been a little overzealous in trying to lock up the Thrasin.
Right, the Thrasin clearly isn't crazy but we know the Thrasin hasn't lost their memory, but it's obvious from their perspective. Yeah, the Thrasin is crazy. Right?
Yeah.
Knowing what they, because at the start of the book, I didn't know what they knew, but then once you know what they know, because you learn more about it's like, if I knew what I knew at the beginning of the book, I would also think this guy was crazy.
Like, imagine if someone from upstate New York came to New York City and wandered around the street asking random people, I need to see the mayor.
Right.
Take me to the mayor. In a universe where the mayor kills anyone who talks to them.
Right. I saw a dragon.
And this is known.
Yep.
Like, literally everyone knows, oh, yeah, if you run into de Blasio, he fucking stabs you. Like, that's just common knowledge. Like, it's on the news every night. How many people did de Blasio stab today?
Yeah.
So that also kind of works. So to
say his name 3 times, he appears.
Yeah, and he's pissed.
Yeah, be quiet, bro.
Yep.
Run away from this guy.
And then you got this jerk comes to town. He's like, yo, dog, I'm going to keep saying his name, like, in your house.
It's like, oh, good God, run away from this. Please arrest this nut job. Put him somewhere where we're safe.
Yep. So, is he really Theseus?
I don't think it matters. What I think does matter is that they suggest that he's Theseus, and his body, memories, and physical body are the ship of Theseus.
Oh, I see what you did there. That works very well.
That's all that matters, right?
Because
he could be just a dude for all you know. It doesn't fucking matter. There's no way to know.
He replaces his memories with new memories bit by bit, and then to drive the point home, he replaces his body parts bit by bit.
Right, he replaces his memories with the memories of Theseus. Does that make him Theseus? He replaces his leg with a foot. I guess is he still Theseus? If he doesn't have Theseus.
Is he still the Amnesian hero? Is he still the Thrasin? Which it almost it excuses the fact that the book keeps calling him by different names depending on the perspective, even within the same paragraph. But then at the end, that actually really does make allegorical sense.
Yeah, but the writing wise, prose wise, it was
is it on purpose?
Prose wise, it was annoying that there was just this pattern of you got 2 names for him, alternate between the 2. All right, now we got 3 names for him, Zombie. We're going to alternate between the 3 names, right? Just to mix up the text a little bit, right? And to not just keep saying Thrasin, right? They just made more names for him and kept cycling through them like a pattern on an American flag. Red, white, red, white, red,
I'll
white.
admit the writing of that could have been a lot more elegant, but I think it was on purpose, and the craft was okay in the sense that the name used, because it's not just the name he used for himself was the Amnesian hero. I am the Amnesian hero, because that was the identity he made for himself from his own memories. But then every other character he interacts with has their own memories of him and has their own perception of him, and give it a different name because those are all very different people. But that theme is explored in
especially the barrier.
Yeah,
who thinks that he's just a figment of his imagination.
That barrier is just like, dude, really?
Yeah, he deserved to get GeekNights.
Yep.
Not really. He wasn't bad. He was just dumb.
Yeah. Well, that faction is dumb.
No. Yeah, because it's not the Cat Lady faction.
Yeah. Can't have more than one person in that faction in the same party, guys.
That's true. That's true. He was alone, to their credit.
Yeah. I probably because his friends were like, listen, and just threw him over the wall. Also, I love how not only was he kind of dumb, but he really fucked everything up by picking up the other end of that thread.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
Seriously?
But otherwise, the naming of the character really does fit the theme, and I think you're right, it doesn't matter if he's Theseus, but I will say that a lot of sci-fi books have handled the concept of what is a person, what is a memory, do memories make you much better than this, with much more elegance.
Yeah.
But it does handle him in a pretty good way. And if you've never read one of those other books, it's kind of like people who encountered philosophy from the Matrix for the first time. Welcome to the party, but I'm glad you've at least come to the table now. You've learned about shadows on the wall. Congratulations.
It's always hilarious just to see, in all aspects of I guess intellectual philosophical thought, especially on the internet, right? I see these threads posted on like board game Reddit or something,
Yep.
where someone's like, oh, something, something, something. It's like they just discovered babies first. And it's like, all right, on the one hand, it's like I want to say to them, bro, that's babies first.
Like, bro, you should have learned that in middle school.
Right. But on the other hand, it's like, this person has just found the small door to the larger world of thinking about how games work. Welcome.
Yep.
Right.
And I can think, like, the reason this book stuck with me is that I had read good science fiction and good fantasy, and I also read a lot of garbage Dungeons and Dragons, Forgotten Realms fantasy. But this book stood out because it addressed all those kinds of things that a, like, freshman in high school Rim would think a lot about. So the book would feel like the book would introduce or expand on those kinds of concepts. And when I was older, I read a lot more and learned a lot more about philosophy. And if I read this book today without having this previous experience, no new concept was introduced to adult Rim in this book.
No. Well, but what maybe if you had never read this book, there would have been, right? You read this book previously.
Yeah, true.
But that being said, I hadn't, and no new concept was introduced to adult Scott. So.
Yeah, because even 1996 Rim had the idea of what is a memory and does that make a person?
Yeah.
Like I had already encountered that core concept.
Yes.
But I had never encountered it in a Dungeons and Dragons book before.
Right.
Never even encountered it in a fantasy setting before. Always sci-fi. At least in my youth. But I'm impressed that this book deals with those concepts and like when you see a branded Dungeons and Dragons kind of book, you don't expect it to take a pretty heavy concept like that and push it all the way into surreal nonsense. Yep. That is not what happens with like popular culture works. Like The Good Place is a really good show, but it's not. I don't think it's gonna get full on Secret of Space like end of Evangelion. I think it's going to be a few steps away from that. This
Evangelion
book,
on Netflix real soon.
yeah.
Let's see what happens.
But this book goes like full on into like crazy, like the world, like everything gets abstract and weird and like the ending is so abrupt. It gets away with the kind of stuff that I would never expect officially licensed anything to get away with. And that really stands out in my mind. Like, it is notable that this book was allowed to be published with the content it has in it, considering its target audience. And I'm impressed with that. Are you glad you read it?
Nah. I mean, basically the way I see it is like, you know, I read those Timothy Zahn Star Wars novels, which everyone said were the best Star Wars novels.
I feel like this is better than those.
Right? And if people say those are the best Star Wars novels, and my opinion of them was Thrawn is a cool character, but otherwise, and maybe Mara Jade or whatever her name is, there's a cool character, but I can barely remember the story. It's kind of whatever, right? If that's the best you got, I ain't reading anymore. So basically, this is like sort of along the same token, whereas like, all right, if this is the best D&D novel you got,
don't read any other D&D books.
I'm not reading anymore. Right? But I can see how, it's like, yes, it is, like Rim said, it's notable that, you know, some with a licensed, you know, an official, you know, IP license on your book, you manage to go off the rails a bit, right? And just instead of just, you know, telling a straightforward, you know, pulp adventure story. That's notable.
And it goes pretty far off the rails. Like the monster in the maze, which is sufficiently horrifying, tears its own skin off. Like,
its skin was all fluffy and getting in the way.
And that is not even the most gruesome thing that happens.
That eating the dude's hand.
Yeah, that was just funny.
Also, right, it is, what was I going to say? I forget. Because you started talking about the
pop culture,
the
like
parts.
Like it got away with this stuff despite.
Oh no! As you know, for the audience, right, for this book being like, you know, young teen D&D, whatever. This book is probably way good for someone like that.
Yeah,
right,
for sure.
Right,
especially because it almost like just
like there are. I'm not right. There are a lot of like young adult novels that are actually good just for all ages, even though they're, you know, branded as young adult novels, right? They're just good for everybody, Like, the Hunger Games is young adult novel, and I mean,
it's pretty good,
perfectly fine for everyone. And it's not like some great novel, but it's better than this. It's right. It's fine for all ages reading, right? But you know, I think this is definitely a young adult novel that is good for the teen, preteen, and for the adult less so.
Yep. But one aspect I really liked about it, because I remember the ending being abrupt, and reading it again, that really
The ending is abrupt.
I love how like it just accelerates and accelerates to this feverish pace, and the end is literally like a series of burning wheel style. Like, are you going to abandon Jake or the mission? Are you going to abandon abandon this or the mission? And then in the end, it's just this fever pace, and then he's lost his limbs, and everyone's gruesomely deformed, and then they just wake up on the street like nothing had happened, except they carry all these wounds, both physical and mental. Like,
you get the impression it's sort of like a loop situation, maybe, which is a little cliche. But
well, he even says he says to himself, looking at the river Styx, "How many times have I done this? Fuck."
Right. Oh, I can't remember the name of the river.
Yeah, and
they keep calling it something else,
the
right?
Leith. The river Styx or the river Leith.
Leith?
Yeah.
Lethe.
You know, it's the whole, like, if you drink from it, you know it by a different name. Like, that's kind of a thing, and it
Right,
uses
you lose your memory when you drink from it.
Yep. And the Lady of Pain, like, it just like with him, it doesn't matter if she is that woman from his memories or not. Most likely, I think Poseidon, like canonically in this, is just a piece of shit who's trying to take over Sigil and put these memories in a giant amphora and tried to trick the Lady of Pain into remembering stuff that may or may not have been true just to destroy her. Like, that tracks with the kind of shit Poseidon would do.
Yeah. Or is it, a thing where it's like, the memories are for, the Thracian guy.
Yeah.
And somehow, if he opens it when the Lady of Pain is there, armed with those memories, he'll be able to like mess with her or something.
Yeah.
Right? I couldn't really tell, but there was like a net in there also or something.
Yep. Poseidon definitely
maybe the net would catch her. He would regain his memory and then be able to take her out or something like that.
Yep. Something like that. Poseidon had a plan, and he had other Greek gods on board, like the wine woman.
Yep.
Like, that's all just sort of explained,
Right.
actually, in a pretty succinct way.
Yeah, and then, so the only thing let's talk about is, like, the real big picture is, like, what's the Lady of Pain's deal, right?
Yep.
So...
Because it's definitely D&D books, like, they like to do this thing of concepts, elemental concepts, like air or fire or pain or love have physical embodiments and like the necessity of good and evil. Like, you can't have good without evil to justify having all the evil shit in the world for you to fight. And it does that with pain.
Right,
Without her...
all the things that are like all the parts of the book that are narrated by the Lady of Pain from her perspective, they always have like these weird things going on. Like, my feet touch the ground and I appear, or the feet come off the ground and she appears. Something like that. So you get the impression like she's invisible, going around, extremely self-aware. Like, this is a trap for Poseidon, but I'm going to fall for it, kind of, right? I can't help it.
Or pain
right?
sucks, but if I don't keep making pain out there, then the world will fall apart. Because without pain, people cannot know joy.
Right.
Which could also be read as the Lady of Pain is deluded, and that's the rationalization for the ridiculous, painful bullshit she's up to.
Yeah, it's like you can sort of see what the Lady of Pain is thinking and like sort of understand how she works. Like, she goes around invisibly and then appears in places, but sort of just maybe isn't in complete control of her own stuff, is just sort of thinking and sort of doing what she has to do, or is, like there's a consciousness that is in this body that does all this pain shit but doesn't control the pain shit,
which is interesting because
almost watches it happen.
A lot of fantasy fiction I've read, both D&D and like good, often when they portray the way a deity thinks or an all-knowing being thinks, they tend to portray it very similarly.
It almost feels like the narrator is the Lady of Pain but is also out of the Lady of Pain's body and is like, watching it's like it's having an out-of-body experience, narrating while watching itself do stuff.
But
right?
I've seen that like writing pattern in a lot of fiction involving gods and omnipotent or omniscient beings.
Right. It's like, oh, I see myself, touch the ground and appear and do these things to the people, and So it's like, is it even it always says me, but it's like, it's the Lady of Pain. It's not like, who else could be? Right?
Yeah.
Especially, if you had any question about it, there's a part where it's like, then I appear. And everyone's like, oh shit, Lady of Pain. It's like, duh, bro.
I like the little tiny bit at the end where it repeatedly points out Jake the Snake's eyes and how you can read her moods based on that. And Karfa, the demon's eyes, because they blaze maroon, which is like a demon thing. and like his eyes will like betray him and all that stuff.
That's all setting stuff, right?
But
Right.
then in the very end, when the Thrasin is looking into the river Styx and deciding whether or not to drink from it, it makes a point of that he sees his eyes flash purple.
No, I didn't catch
And
that
he
part.
says something to the effect of, I'll never turn my back on Atanari again, almost implying that the path to becoming a demon like that is to do the horrible things that he keeps doing because he keeps forgetting he keeps drinking from this river, forgetting himself, and making the same horrible mistakes over and over again.
Like making demon packs.
Yeah, like almost turning into a
Chopping
demon.
people's hands off and putting them on his feet.
Well, like, to be fair, he was not on board with that plan.
I'm just saying, he still did it.
And to be fair, Carfoot's plan there, probably the best possible plan considering the circumstances, which is an interesting point.
Demon would say that.
But yeah. But that's it. Bit by all the decisions they make once they meet the demon are rational in the context of what they're doing, but they're also tiny steps toward being evil. Tiny steps toward being a demon. At what point do you say, no, fuck this, I'd rather just die than continue this quest? But at the same time, it's very easy to justify those steps he takes, and Carfoot is right in a way about everything except maybe the core concept of maybe you just shouldn't have put yourself in this maze in the first place.
And they didn't put him in the guy's cam and like shoved him in. Somehow.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
even know how they got in. They were just there and then they're in it.
Yep.
Anyway.
So yeah, this book is memorable. I think it is the best D&D branded book, having read it again. I would recommend if you're an edgelord teen who's into D&D, read this book.
Sure.
Like, yeah, for sure. If you're in high school,
I guess if you have to read a D&D branded officially licensed book, I guess this, not knowing any other ones, I guess this is the fucking one. But if you're an adult, I think there's other books you could be reading.
Yeah.
You don't need to read this.
but I feel like too, people who have read this book versus people who have not run Planescape games very differently.
Sure, if you're going to run a Planescape game, you probably should read this book.
Yeah.
Or if you're into Planescape, you should probably read this book. If you've seen other Planescape stuff and haven't read this book, maybe you should. This is probably like the core Planescape deal. Maybe if you're going to play a Planescape video game like Planescape Torment and you actually want to play it properly and not just sort of skim through it, this will give you a lot more context, make the game a better experience for you.
Of course, the other thing you could do is just read
Or vice versa.
I have it over there. You can just read the Planescape book that just explains everything about the setting.
If you're a super RPG nerd, I feel like that's a necessity to read, the core book.
It ain't bad reading. It's interesting reading
Yeah.
that book. It's not long.
I feel like that's a necessity if you're, a super nerd like
Dude, it's like half as thick as the Forgotten Realms book.
Probably. Probably more interesting, too.
Yeah. Forgotten Realms is not actually that interesting.
It's just fantasy world.
Yeah.
Elves, dwarves, whatever.
Like, Forgotten Realms is on the same level of fantasy world as, like, the Wheel of Time world.
Yeah, to Planescape's credit, it's a fantasy world. Yeah, the multiverse is a cliche, but there's no other multiverse that's messed up like this one.
Yeah.
Right.
And the Planescape setting does a really good job of making all the pieces, like, make sense in context of each other in a way that other settings like this tend not to. The only problem with the Planescape setting is that no edition of Dungeons & Dragons is good at telling that kind of story. A story where belief makes power, like will to power is a real thing. Like, I feel like you would need a completely novel, like, mechanical engine to roleplay a good Planescape game.
All right, so
I think we're done here.
you want to talk about the next book club?
What are you going to pick? It's your pick.
Oh, so I had a few books that were potential selections, right? A little list going on.
All right, I'm ready to type this into Amazon in case I've never heard of it.
You heard of it.
Okay.
There were, I was hemming and hawing, going back and forth. I had justifications for all of them, right? You know my justifications, like book on the shelf that I already own and haven't read,
Yep.
something that's an odyssey, a sci-fi book about a post-apocalypse, something,
Yeah.
the kind of things that we would choose as a book club book, right?
You know what I'm thinking about for my next one? A Moomin Troll book.
Those are comics, though, usually. You're going to read it in like 5 minutes.
The other books.
They're also expensive. Anyway, so... suddenly, though, I think it was Sunday? I think it was on Sunday. I woke up and I'm reading Twitter early in the morning, and I see some tweets, and one of the tweets is like, hey, Scott, one of those books you're considering for the book club that was sort of like pretty high up on the list? Yeah, there's like an exhibit about it at the Met, and it's closing today. It is the last day to go see
Whoa.
this exhibit. So I went over to the Met. I was like, well, I guess it's fucking raining. Might as well just go over there. It cost me $0 to go in there. I actually paid $1 for 2 people. Right? I went in there. I checked out the fashion thing that's going on and some other stuff. And I went to the exhibit about this book. And so I knew as soon as I saw that tweet, I'm like, well, I guess that's the fucking book, isn't it? Right? And then the exhibit only even more reaffirmed my decision. So, Rim, most of our book club selections, I think we've done maybe 1 or 2 nonfictions, but they're almost all novels. Right?
Yeah.
So I figure we're reading all these novels.
Wait, if you're going to pick nonfiction, I have avoided nonfiction only because I didn't want to hear you bitch about it.
If we're doing all these novels, shouldn't we do the first novel that was ever written by any human being ever?
Gilgamesh?
No, that is not a novel.
Okay.
That is like an epic poem or some shit.
All right. Don't say Canterbury Tales.
That is not the first. That is way
I know.
newer.
Just making sure because I do not like the Canterbury Tales. I do not ever want to read them again.
The first novel that was ever written by any human being ever is The Tale of Genji by Murasaki Shikibu.
I read a translation of that in high school.
So I have done extensive research on the many translations. Sadly, there is no amazing...
His glove lets you attack 6 times.
There is no amazing new translation written by some genius woman for us to read.
God damn it. No Emily Wilson.
There is no Emily Wilson equivalent Tale of Genji for us to read. Otherwise, that would have been the obvious choice. So apparently I went looking around, and apparently the best translation, according to many sources on internet, is the Royale Tyler translation, which you will find in the Penguin Classics Deluxe Edition. Don't get the not Deluxe Edition. That's abridged or some bullshit.
Okay.
You got to get Penguin Classics Deluxe Edition, and that will give you the right translation with no abridgedness.
All right. I'm into it.
And also, so the thing at the exhibit that I got to talk about, right, is that, remember, this is the first novel ever. And what the exhibit was about, you can actually get the book from the exhibit. I just saw it on Amazon. It's called The Illustrated Tale of Genji. Because the exhibit was all sorts of ancient works of art, well, not ancient, but centuries old works of art, right, about the book, right, like scrolls, wall scrolls, folding screens, all sorts of crazy stuff like that, is that, first of all, first novel ever, there are people who are insane about this book, right? Like crazed fans.
Sounds right.
The same kind of crazed fans we see going over like TV shows today or whatever.
Sounds right.
Or bands, right? I saw at this exhibit, loads of fan art, not just of the character in the book Genji and scenes from the book, but also the author of the book, right, Murasaki Shikibu. There was tons of art of people like imagining her, like drawing pictures of her writing the book. Right? She had crazed fans, like stalker fans, like like the Beatles do or whatever, or K-pop boy groups do. There were several scrolls depicting imaginary poetry battles between Shikibu and other great poets who did not live at the same time that she did.
This just proves once again that humans fundamentally have not changed in any meaningful way.
Not that shit. So this is a human being who was such a fan of this author that they drew and wrote a poetry battle that was made up by them, but is imagined to be a poetry battle between this person and another person. So it'd be like if I animated a fight between Mike Tyson and Muhammad Ali, right? With and I could draw, right? And I couldn't box, but boxing. Just
I want
came
to
up
see
'cause it
Mike
was my thing
Tyson
of the
versus
day.
Jimmy Smith.
Right, it's like who would win in a fight, Superman versus whatever, right? And you go ahead and, right? It's like this is some crazy shit that's going on, and this was the first novel ever, which means this has literally been going on as long as books have existed.
All right.
So
I think it's a good book pick.
after seeing that shit, how could we not read this book? That is, probably when I read this book, I'm going to see like, oh my God, all these things have been referencing this for my whole life and I didn't notice.
Yeah.
And that's I figured that reason alone was enough to bring it high on the list before even knowing there was an exhibit over there.
In high school, I didn't read the whole thing, but I read several long excerpts from it as part of a class.
Oh yeah, get ready, adults, because this motherfucker is 1,224 pages.
So we'll do this on the next Thursday, Geek Nights.
That's right. Get ready.
We'll probably finish it faster than we did Pages of Pain, because we didn't actually read Pages of Pain until like right before we did the show.
Yeah, but actually I'm reading another book, so I won't start this until I finish the other book.
Okay, you got some time.
So you gotta have a lot of time for this one, and you're gonna need it for 1,226 unabridged translated pages.
All right. Did a good show.
Are we gonna go to the scene?
I think so. Looks like the rain stopped. We got some dumplings we can eat really quick. We can get some food there too. We can get the G like right